Okay, I am finally going to do my first bake with Dolores. I'm going to use the exact same recipe that I shared earlier this week. If you click on this comment, it will take you back to the full recipe tutorial. I'll kind of quickly talk through it here, but if you want the full tutorial, you can go back. You can also just Google Baker Betty No Knead Sourdough and you will find the recipe. I have 300 grams of water in my bowl. I'm adding 100 grams of my ripe active starter. It's really, really bubbly. It's really ready to go in my dough. Dolores is about 14 days old, so just about 2 weeks old, which is still very young. It's not going to make as good of bread as my really old starter that I made the last loaf of bread with was. When your starter's young, it just doesn't have as much power to make great bread, but it'll get better with some time. Next, I'm adding 500 grams of flour, and I would prefer to use bread flour, but I actually don't have any at home. I really need to get some. So I'm using unbleached all-purpose flour. It will do fine, but bread flour is going to give you a little more strength in your dough. You'll get more rise usually if you use bread flour. And the last ingredient is 10 grams of salt. I usually use kosher salt, but you can use whatever salt you have on hand. Mixing this up as much as I can with my spatula, but then I am going to need to get my hand in here because this is a pretty low hydration dough, meaning that there's not a ton of water in this dough. This is great for a beginner recipe because the dough will be a little easier for you to handle if you're not super used to working with a wet dough, which most sourdough recipes are pretty wet doughs. And also, you don't really need to knead it and you don't need to do any stretch and folds. So I had a lot of comments on my last video that I didn't do any stretch and folds. And stretch and folds are done on doughs that are high hydration doughs, meaning they have a lot of water in them and they're so sticky that you could not knead them if you really wanted to. So the stretch and fold process is a gentler process so that you can come in and get some strength in your dough without having to work a lot of flour into it. But this dough is a very low hydration dough. We could really knead this if we wanted to. I say this is a no knead recipe. I do a very short amount of kneading on here just to kind of bring the dough together. But the purpose of this recipe is to be a very stripped down recipe to have you do only the absolute necessary things to make a decent loaf of sourdough bread. So I call it a no knead recipe. Usually in my instructions, I just have you like kind of work it together in the bowl until all the flour is hydrated. But lately I have actually been putting it out on my counter and doing a quick knead on it. You could put it into your stand mixer with the dough hook too if you wanted to do a knead on it. I spent less than a minute on that, just really getting it together until it's a cohesive dough and there's no dry patches. And now I'm just going to put it in a clean bowl. You can put a damp towel over it. You can put plastic wrap over it, whatever you want to do. And then this needs to rise. Depending on your room temperature, this is going to need more or less time. My house sits around 72, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. This will usually take about 10 to 12 hours for mine to rise. But if you have a much warmer house, you might want to reduce that rising time to like 8 hours. But I'm just going to let it rise overnight. I'll check on it in the morning. We are looking for this to at least rise 50%, but usually it'll rise more than that. Because this is a no knead dough, the time that this rises is actually going to do all of the gluten development for us. There are kind of three things that will develop gluten in a dough. The first thing is time. When water is added to flour, gluten will start forming, whether you want it to or not. And the more time is allowed for those to just sit together, the more strong the gluten will form. There is a plateau, and eventually the gluten will break down. But at the beginning, it will form a strong gluten structure. And then the second thing is kneading, and the third thing is stretch and folds. So we are just going to let time do all of the work for us here. We'll come back to this in the morning, and I will post about it in the morning and the next steps. Okay. One last thing. This is what I have left in my jar after I added my starter in. It's just some scrapings. I will probably take a spatula if I have one. And scrape everything kind of down towards the bottom. But I'm not going to feed this again. I fed this morning. I'm not baking tomorrow morning, so I can just wait until tomorrow's feeding. Now, if I was at the point where I was starting to store my starter in the refrigerator, after I put my starter in my dough, I just put this whole container back in the refrigerator, just like this. Or maybe I would scrape, if it's really crusty, maybe I would scrape the scrapings into a new jar. This just goes back in the fridge. And then next time I'm going to bake, I will just add my 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water to this. 100 of it goes into my dough. This goes back in the fridge over and over. And I don't really have discard with that method. If I need to make more than one loaf of bread, one, I can just feed it a larger quantity and give it more time to get active, or I can take it out a day early, give it a feed, not discard next day, give it a bigger feed, and then I have plenty to go in my dough. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.